I've been asked to briefly introduce myself. My biggest claim to fame is that I'm on a top 10 list with top 20 list with President Obama, Elon Musk, and the heads of a bunch of car companies because of my influence on the fuel economy debate. And this is basically just from writing on Cleantechnica about electric vehicles. So this is something I've been passionately doing for a few years, and I'm going to give a quick intro to what I think is a critical barrier to electrification, and then these people are going to speak a lot more about the barriers and the solutions. So first of all, there are a lot of benefits to electric vehicles. You know, they're much simpler, so they're much less maintenance, much cheaper to operate. The electric motor is about 3 times more efficient than a gas engine, so you have big fuel savings. Of course, you're not consuming oil, so you don't contribute to potential oil wars. You're cutting air pollution, which we've seen saves us hundreds of billions of dollars. Of course, it's good for fighting global warming. But as I've stated before, I think the 2 biggest benefits to electric vehicles that will drive the EV revolution, that will see us have a transformation like we had with smartphones and tablets, are that they're super fun to drive and they're super convenient. When you step on the pedal of an electric car, you have instant torque. So it's like the experience for me with the silence of electric motor and the power is like it's being in a spaceship. And it really, with the bzzz, it feels like it to me. And people for years after owning electric cars, they get an EV smile when they drive. This is a picture from the Tesla Model S P85D. It's the quickest production sedan in history. And the other electric cars are also a lot of fun. This other big benefit is they're super convenient. You get home, you plug in, you're done. You don't have to go to gas stations. But there are some huge barriers. This is a study from 2013, should be updated, but I haven't seen anything better since. And it showed that about 5% of surveyed Americans were very familiar with the Chevy Volt, and fewer than that were very familiar with the Nissan Leaf, the Tesla Model S. People don't know about these vehicles. Another piece of information from that study, about 30% of people were very interested or extremely interested in a plug-in vehicle with a $28,000 price point. Such vehicles are on the market. If you count incentives, they're even cheaper. So people were expressing interest without realizing that these vehicles are on the market, I think. When they talked about their EV preference by brand, Toyota topped the list despite the fact that it might be the biggest laggard in electrification. It has a Toyota Prius plug-in that has a very small electric-only range, and the gas engine kicks in when you accelerate fast, when you're on the highway, etc. So I think what people are doing, they're associating electric cars with hybrids, conventional hybrids like the Toyota Prius, and they don't realize the difference. And there are huge differences because conventional hybrids don't have those 2 huge benefits that electric cars have. So the biggest barrier to the EV revolution, I think, is getting more people aware of these vehicles and experiencing them. The last chart from that study, fewer than 50% of the respondents thought EVs were exciting to drive and own. That's hilariously sad. That's really, this is the benefit. If you talk to EV owners why they have an EV or what they love about it, it's that they're exciting, that they're fun to drive and own, and they're much more convenient than going to the gas station every week. So the biggest barrier, I think, to the EV revolution is very simply awareness and experience of the consumer. So hopefully there are a lot of models to get beyond that barrier, and these people will be talking about several of them, and as well as other research. So to start off, we have Brian Hansen from the city of Copenhagen. He's going to go a little bit beyond and talk about bicycling as well, but Copenhagen has been a world leader in bicycle transportation and a more balanced modal split, and it's been working, of course, to electrify its city. It's a leader in cutting carbon emissions, and that's part of its strategy. So Brian will tell us more about what they're doing in Copenhagen, Denmark.
Thank you. Kind of practical civil administration kind of view. We talk a lot about electric vehicles. I suppose you do from the rest of the panel. I'll just try to take your attention to some trends we see in Copenhagen, because there are other modes of electric transport. And in the whole of Denmark is not a big state, but in the whole of Denmark, like 5.5 million, we have 3,745 electric vehicles, cars in total. we have no idea how many electric bikes we do have. Last year, somewhere above 20,000 were sold. So at least probably like 100,000 or something like that in the country. That's 1 in 25 bicycles. In Holland, 1 in every 10 bicycles sold is an electric bicycle. In Germany, last year, they sold over 500,000 electric bicycles. In China, they have counted the number of electric bicycles and the production and the use in the millions, maybe very high millions numbers. So that's really something that has kicked off. And then the next question is, then what did we do to achieve this success? Well, electric vehicles, even in Copenhagen, we did a lot of things. We put up infrastructure. We said, please use our roads, use our sidewalks for plug-in, for reserved parking spaces. Everybody else, whether you're a cafe owner or whatever, a hot dog seller or whatever, have to pay, but please use our public space for free. We have like 180% of new tax on buying a new car in Denmark. To promote electric cars, we said no taxes, so they are compatible in prices with a traditional car. Of course, to somewhat to expense of the national administration. In Copenhagen, we exempted them from every parking fee in the city. So if you're an electric car owner, you can park for free. Everybody else needs to pay, even residents, to some extent. We try to require facilities for charging whenever people build parking houses, build spaces for parking in new urban developments. We require infrastructure for electric vehicles. And finally, since I think 2010 or something like that, 2012, every car bought in the city of Copenhagen is an electric car. Not work vehicles and so on, but traditional cars used within the city. And there's probably a lot of other things that I can't remember. Well, we did a lot of things to achieve these 3,742 cars. So, anybody can guess what we did on the other side with the bicycles? See, you all guessed right, we did absolutely nothing. Just goes to show that innovation can happen also in transport, and it's not just up to us as cities or whatever to try to encourage it every once in a while, and an idea comes along that actually makes sense to a lot of people. The other point I would try to make, as Zachary already mentioned, is that to us the best way of getting to renewable transport, to carbon-free transport, is to look at the modes that is not individual car traffic. We just heard that Vancouver reached 50%. When I look at most of my colleagues in other different cities, you can say that, yes, we have a very high share of bicycle traffic in Copenhagen. Some 32% of all traffic starting, ending, or just happening within the municipal borders are done on bike. 45% of all commuting are done on bike. But if we put them together, we are very similar. It's the same in Berlin, it's the same in Vienna, it's in Paris. We have a goal of, 25%, some even have 20% car traffic, or we have a goal of 75% of other modes. Some are even up to 80. But that just, of course we need to electrify the cars, but we in Copenhagen are really slow in that one. So we are working at least as hard or even harder on promoting the other modes of transport. And now I also end up in that situation where I talk about what I don't want. I don't want the individual car traffic, and that's my other point. Don't talk about what we don't want. Walking, cycling, public transport creates a livable city, creates a city that is much more attractive to be in, creates a city where you are in eye level with your fellow fellow people moving around the city, and basically paint the picture of what kind of cities do we want. We actually talk about eye level in our urban planning, because when you walk, when you take the bike, when you're in the public transport, you're among people, you're on eye level. That not only reduces your carbon footprint, but it actually creates a safer and nicer place to be. And the concept of safety or security, or I don't know the English term, but kind of social security, no, not social security, but that was the wrong English term, I know that. You know what I mean. The risk of walking home at night when you're all alone, you feel really unsafe. Walking home or cycling home amongst a lot of people, you don't feel unsafe. That's the point I was trying to make. So, as I said, really trying to push towards, he said he would give me some sign, I guess that was it, when there was only a minute left, trying to push towards our goal in our climate plan is 75% transport, walking, cycling, and buses. And then finally, a point about electric vehicles. I went to Seoul in January. This is the political brain trust of Copenhagen in terms of technical and environmental issues. This is our technical and environmental committee. We went to see the best the Korean auto industry had to offer in terms of electric transport. This is induction charging buses that they don't need the big batteries but charge along the way. The things you see, they are looking at the pavement is where when the bus is over it charges automatically. And when we had to see this technical wonder, they took us to the zoo. So I know there are 2 of these buses somewhere in the suburbs of Seoul, but basically this train taking tourists around the zoo was where the innovation was happening. So I just wanted to finish up with, in terms of electric vehicles, what I think we could be doing more and maybe could be room for discussion in a forum like this is, why are we so slow in terms of public procurement, in terms of the things that is actually within our reach? Now I'm talking as a city official, of course. Public transport, our buses. In Vancouver, you have these trolley buses that is already running on electrification. We have old diesel buses in Copenhagen. Our municipal transport, yes, we can buy traditional personal cars. What about the rest? What about the trucks? What about the deliveries? What about everything else? And car sharing, yes, we also have some role to say in what kind of car sharing companies is operating in our city. How do we push for electrification in that field? That's it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Gil Friend. He's a legend. If you're working for a city, a state, a municipality, a county, a province, and you're working on electrification or solar, you need to talk to Gil. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Palo Alto. He's charged to develop a world-class sustainability strategy for the city and manage the activities that will lead Palo Alto to being the greenest city in America, as he states, whatever that means. Widely considered one of the founders of the sustainability business movement, he's been named an inaugural member of the Sustainability Hall of Fame, along with Amory Lovins, Carl Henrik, Robert, a bunch of other people, a few other people, it's not a bunch, by the International Society of Sustainability Professionals, and one of the 10 most influential sustainability voices in America by The Guardian. Gil.
Thank you. Thank you, Zachary, and thank you for the image of eye level as a core planning concept. I'm going to take that back home with me. Thank you all. It's been a great conference to be here with you. Some of you know Palo Alto. We're in the San Francisco Bay Area at the heart of Silicon Valley. Some of the stats, this is a small city, much smaller than Copenhagen, although about 1,000 electric vehicles, even at that size. Note that our daytime population is massively bigger than our nighttime population. This is the enormous commute flows of the Bay Area coming in and out. We're home to Stanford University, a pretty good asset to have as a neighbor, and companies like HP and SAP and Tesla, who we've talked about, and others. Very interesting and innovative and progressive community. We've done a lot on sustainability. One of the first climate action plans in the US in 2007. Here's our greenhouse gas emissions down about 38% against the 1990 baseline. Pretty cool. And a lot more to do. What you'll notice here is what points to the core of the strategy going forward. The red is road transportation. The blue is natural gas. Yellow is electricity, which has already been made carbon neutral. But to go forward to any kind of significant greenhouse gas reductions, we have to take out the impact of natural gas, and we have to transform transportation. And we obviously can't transform transportation as a city of 66,000 and a metro of many million. We have to do that collaboratively. And a lot more is required to meet the goals. The red line is the glide path to 80 by 50. The blue is where we are. If we keep doing what we've been doing, we can probably get there, but that's a really big if, because it's not consistent efforts over the past 10 years. But rather than scare the city council and say this is a huge challenge, we're saying, hey, you know, it's actually possible to get to there, and maybe it's possible to do 80% by 2030. And what if it were possible to do climate neutral in 10 years, like a moonshot? So our climate plan now development is looking at those three scenarios and bringing forward grounded strategies to achieve each of them to support the kind of public discussion to decide where to go. Key strategies in there: electrification, mobility, water, and finance. I'll talk about the electrification and mobility intersection here today. The traditional approach on transportation has been there's too much traffic, let's build more roads. There's not enough parking spaces, let's build more parking, which of course makes the problem worse. So what the strategy needs to be is to find ways to reduce vehicle miles traveled, to reduce greenhouse gas intensity of travel, and really key we're finding is to increase convenience, because no matter what we do, if it's not more convenient to use the alternatives than to get in a car and drive, people are going to drive, and they're going to drive in whatever car they've got. How do we do that? Through mobility as a service, which we won't talk about much today, electrification, performance-based planning, allowing the market to innovate within rules that the city sets, and using kind of lean startup, agile, rapid learning cycles to get us there. This is a map from our friends in Helsinki of the mobility as a service notion. Imagine all of your transit modes accessible through a single app and a single service in your cell phone, integrated, one point of planning, one point of booking, one point of paying. So we're piloting that, developing pilots for that as a regional strategy in Silicon Valley. But as a city, our focus has been to build EV readiness. We're not going to drive technology policy. We're not going to drive tax incentives at the state and federal level, but what we can do is make it more possible to have an EV and have it work in our city. A year and a half ago, we passed an EV readiness ordinance, which requires that in all new construction for parking structures, commercial buildings, and multifamily residential, you must provide EV readiness. Readiness meaning conduit, capacity to put in level 1 and level 2 chargers. We're not defining the technology requirements because that's changing very quickly. But we want to make sure that when someone is ready to do that, they don't have to go bust up infrastructure and hammer through concrete walls and spend a lot of money. We're going to make it easy at the start. So that's where we have a leveraged requirement. Anything new in certain categories, put it in. We're required to do cost effectiveness analysis. We've assessed that this is less than 1% of the capital cost of a project. Tiny, and obviously has benefits for the property owner in terms of the amenities they can offer for their residents. We used a collaborative process on this, brought together key stakeholders to identify what the issues were and find common ground so the council could support this 8-0. Flexibility, because the industry is changing. We can't make the technology guesses, but we could provide the boundaries for the playing field in which people operate. And really key is removing barriers to entry. We think, hypothesis, we'll see how this plays out, that our biggest leverage isn't trying to drive people to do something, but to get out of their way and to allow the innovation in our region and the market to really proceed. There are challenges in this mix. If we, in fact, are successful at electrifying, taking down our natural gas load and increasing our electrical load, there's challenges to the utility system. We operate the municipal utility, which is a great opportunity and asset for us and a real challenge because we have to maintain the integrity and the safety and reliability of the grid. And if 1 or 2 or 3 people on a block buy Teslas, or 2 Teslas, we have to put in a new transformer. And in fact, if people put in electric vehicles, they may have to upgrade the panels, the electrical panel in their house from 20 or 30 to 50 or 100 or 200 or even 400 amps. And so you have a capacity issue of how fast can the building trades put that supply in over the course of 22,000 households in the city. That's an actual functional limit on how fast we can go on our goals unless we bring up the capacity of that industry. Public right-of-way we are thinking about. We haven't decided how to move on that yet. We think workplace charging is a really key leverage point in addressing the range anxiety that sometimes keeps people away from electric vehicles. We're still trying to figure out what do we do about existing homes. We can require things for new. Anytime you pull a permit, we can say thou shalt do these things. We can require things for renovations above a certain size, but most of our building stock is not turning over in most years. And if we only rely on those intervention points, the change is too slow. So that's something we're thinking about. I would welcome any of your ideas about what's an appropriate way to encourage people who are not planning to do anything with their building to do something relevant and cool. Lots of levers that we can use, ranging from education and encouragement to mandates. Really key, as Copenhagen spoke about, is procurement. Our city manager said one of our strategies is we go first. Anything we want to encourage anybody else to do, we do it in City Hall. So we just passed a policy this year, adopted a policy. Back up a moment. A few years ago, we decided to make all of our city sedans compressed natural gas. That was the cleanest alternative at the time. Now with carbon neutral electricity, electricity is cleaner than gas, so we're now requiring not get an electric when you can, get an electric period. That's the default. If your range requirements or duty cycles or load requirements say that doesn't work, write an exception and that will be granted. But the default now goes to green. And we're doing that in fleet, and we're doing that in paper and copiers and everywhere we can find in the procurement system. Mandates where they are appropriate, but we're not sure that that's the best lever for us. Really big lever is in finance and looking at the total cost of operation. So to the fleet decision, EVs cost more than ICEs. Significantly more. We're required to buy the most cost-effective vehicle. We have two different budgets, as many governments do. We have a capital budget and an operating budget. EV costs more in the capital budget, costs less in the operating budget. Plus, as a city, we don't get the benefit of the tax incentives from federal and state government. So we did an analysis of total cost of ownership, shows dramatically less cost of ownership. We got a permission to lease the vehicle so that our lessor captures the incentives and passes them on to us. And we think we're going to save $1,000 to $1,500 per vehicle, but we had to create a new financial management process in the city to be able to do that. Otherwise, we were leaving money on the table every day. The guiding principle for us is we go first wherever possible. We show the way, we prove that it works. As I said, we've got, California's probably got the highest density of EVs in the United States. Bay Area, Santa Clara County's got the highest in the state. Palo Alto's got the highest in the county. And the question is, what do we do next? How do we encourage that, as well as the other elements of bicycles, mobility as a service, and all the ways of getting people out of cars? When I started this job a year and a half ago, one of the EV advocates said, my goal is to have an EV in every driveway. And I said, no, maybe not. Maybe the goal is not to have an internal combustion car in any driveway. But maybe half of us, or 80% of us, or 90% of us don't need to own cars at all. If we can answer this question, how do we make it more convenient for anyone, anywhere, at any time, to not have to get into a car and drive?
So Cara Clairman is president and CEO of Plug and Drive. She's a seasoned environmental professional with 20 years of experience in the environmental sustainability fields in both public and private sectors. She's been a member of the advisory committee of Greening Greater Toronto, chair of Board of Management, Energy and Environment for Ontario Centres of Excellence, vice president of sustainable development at Ontario Power Generation, and an environmental law associate. Cara.
Well, thank you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Plug and Drive and what we're trying to do, and I hope there'll be time for questions in the end. You've been here at a really fantastic forum where I think a lot of you folks already totally get this, so I'm going to be quick on the business case for electric cars. But basically we have a huge opportunity, particularly in Canada, where we have very low emitting electricity in almost every province. And so right now, we have greenhouse gas emissions from transportation as the largest emitting sector in almost every jurisdiction. If it's not the top, in Ontario, it's the largest emitting sector. In most provinces, it's either first or second. And so with that, and you have this low emitting grid, Canada really should be a leader in electrifying transportation because electricity can actually be the solution here. And we're going to talk a little bit about why. Now from this graph, it's a lot of details. I'm trying to show you all the provinces, but what you just need to get from this is your EV will emit significantly less greenhouse gas than a gas car. And basically, it's in the ballpark, for example, in BC, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, the lowest emitting grids, you're going to be dropping your emissions by about 90% or about 5,000 kilograms per year. It's huge emissions. It's probably the largest single thing a person can do other than giving up a car or not flying. So huge reduction potential. And the thing that I think a lot of people don't know is how much money you can save. And actually, we spend a lot of time on the math around the cost savings because we do find it's really compelling and helps persuade a lot of people who say, yeah, the environmental benefit is nice, but what's it going to cost me? And you've heard, EVs are a little bit more expensive up front, but when you do the total cost of ownership, you're going to save anywhere from about $1,500 to about $2,500, depending on the size of vehicle and how much you drive. Annually. So, I'll just give my own personal example. I switched from a minivan to a Nissan Leaf, and yeah, I gave up a little bit on size, but I save about $2,500 a year. My electricity bill for my car is about $300 a year. So fuel, it also reminds us actually electricity is really inexpensive when you line it up against other commodities. So quite compelling, and that's true in basically every province of Canada. And I don't think you even really need to go to the health benefit to make the business case. I think you can just totally make it on the environmental and the cost. But the medical associations have done the math on the cost of air pollution, and transportation is a very significant contributor to that. And those are big, big healthcare costs that we could also reduce. So I think, you sum it up, it's really a sustainability winner. You've got lower emissions, you've got lower cost, and in every province, electricity is made locally. So you also have the benefit that you plug into your local electricity, that's local jobs, local infrastructure, and when you buy oil and gas, typically you send your money somewhere else. And so for a lot of people, that's the reason they might do it. And if you take an Ontario example, where I'm from, we have a surplus of clean electricity at night. It's almost entirely nuclear and hydro, so from a greenhouse gas perspective, very low emitting. And it's surplused at night, which means we actually give it away at a negative price many nights of the year, so we lose money on it. So if we could actually get people to plug their cars in, of course most convenient will be at night, we can actually do our province an economic favor. And that's actually true in other provinces as well, because of course we use a lot less electricity at night when people will plug in their cars. So it makes a lot of sense in a lot of jurisdictions. So how are we doing? This is sort of the number we're at now in Canada, just as of a month ago. And a lot of people say to me, wow, that's not very many. And, I would just say, what, these numbers are actually pretty good. Just remember that the vehicles have only been on the market for about 3 years. And in the first 2 years, there were basically 2 makes and models available in a handful of dealerships. So people who got those cars, they had to really want them. And even to this day in Canada, if you go to your local dealership, there's a very good chance they will not have an EV. And if they have one, they might have one, and it might be white. And then, you'd be amazed how big a barrier that can be, because people want the color they want and the features they want. And it's not like a Civic where you can go and you can pick right off the lot any color, any set of features. So we have a real uphill battle with the supply side of EVs. So, these people really wanted that car, and they waited for the car. And so these numbers actually are decent. And by the way, they're better than the Prius numbers were at the same number of years of development. I don't think anyone would call that a flop. So I think we can all agree that, the numbers are on the up and up. They're doubling annually. And we're also seeing a huge increase in makes and models. So right now, you can buy an EV in 15 different makes and models in Canada. And some harder to get than others, but you can. And by, I would say, a year to a year and a half from now, there'll be another 15. So soon, the argument that, well, there isn't really one I like, will be gone. So when Porsche says, you know what, we make performance cars, and we realize that electric is actually a better performer, so we're actually changing all our cars to electric. When you hear things like that, 14 makes and models from Porsche alone, you know that the world is going electric. So finally, what can a small NGO in any particular community do to help? So we've been trying to figure out, well, what can we do? And so mostly we do education. So we do ride and drives, butts and seats, get people to see the cars, try the cars. We help people get chargers in their homes, because some people, it's really hard actually to figure that all out by yourself, and the automakers don't really help you. Also, we realized no one was making a really good map where all the public chargers are. Each brand was mapping their own chargers. So great, you know where the ChargePoint chargers are or the Eaton chargers are. It's like, well, I'm a driver. I just want to know where all the chargers are. I don't care what brand they are. So we just put them all together on a map. And CAA now has that on an app, so you can find out where the public chargers are available. And finally, we don't have much Canadian data. All our data on EV owners comes from California. And maybe those are similar people to the people who are adopting electric cars here, but we don't know. So we've started an EV Owners Club, and if you are an owner, please sign up. And the purpose for that is to collect data so we can learn who are these early adopters, what things can we do to help more people become those early adopters. And we need to learn about those Canadian adopters, and we're just on the start of that. This just gives you an idea of what you got going on here in BC. And actually, there's quite a lot of public chargers. There's about 2,500 across Canada. And a good chunk in BC. Actually, BC is the leader in infrastructure, so you've got a good jump on the rest of us. Ontario's a laggard. And finally, I think something really exciting that we probably don't talk enough about, but you know, it's kind of, we're just on the edge of it, is the potential for storage in cars and to contribute to distributed energy. My car sits on my driveway for a lot of the day, and I could actually offer my battery back into the grid at the peak, shave the peak, maybe someday avoid the need for a gas plant to be built for peak. So there's a lot of opportunity here in the demand management and electricity storage space with your car. So it's going to be more than a vehicle. It's going to be electricity on the go, and I'll be pleased to take your questions afterwards.
Eve Howe is a Metro Vancouver air quality planner, plug-in British Columbia. She's been working as an air quality planner for over a decade, both in the US and in Canada. She's currently with Metro Vancouver, which is the regional government for the metropolitan Vancouver area, representing 21 member municipalities. Metro Vancouver is a member of Plug-in BC, which represents groups and organizations in BC that have been supporting the uptake of electric vehicles. She will be talking about Emotive, an innovative public outreach campaign being delivered province-wide by Plug-in BC.
Thanks. So I used some of his time to take up my 6 minutes by giving a long intro. But anyways, back in 2012, the province of British Columbia co-funded the installation of a number of charging stations, and I think Cara just showed the map of all of the public charging network that we have here in British Columbia. So that was a very successful program, and we have hundreds of stations now available for the public. Once those were put in, the next question was, what do we do? You know, we have these in there. They're somewhat being used, but not as much as we'd like. So the next step was really just to broadcast to the public that these exist. So we started going down the road of looking to develop a public outreach campaign. And as we did this, one of the first things we realized was that, first of all, no one cares really that much about the chargers. The general public is not interested in the charging stations. There's a reason why you don't see Apple advertising their iPhone by focusing on the charger. What captures people's imaginations and interests are the cars. So the next step was to really focus on the cars and understanding what the public and what the market knew about these cars. So we went and did some research, and we had a number of findings during this process. First off, awareness of electric vehicles is low, and we already heard some of that from Zach's presentation. The World Wildlife Foundation in 2012 did a poll of 1,000 Canadians and found that 47% of Canadians were not aware of electric vehicles. They didn't even know they existed, they never seen one, never saw them on TV, print, nothing. So that was our first hurdle, was to get over that just simple awareness, hey, there's such a thing as an electric vehicle. The second research finding that conclusion that we came to was that people buy cars emotionally, and that's no surprise to anyone who works selling cars, is that it's an emotional purchase. People don't necessarily think rationally. And that kind of feeds into the next two findings, and that is that the driving experience matters most, and EV owners primarily love the cars for their performance. And again, Zach kind of touched on this. We pulled out some research from the Pecan Street Research Institute, which polled EV owners and asked them, what do you love most about your electric vehicle? And over 50% answered the power and performance. 30% said the quietness of it, and only 11% said the social and environmental values. So although most of us here in this room may be driven by that, that's not what drives the public. So we had to refocus our campaign based on what people actually cared about. The next conclusion was that the most persuasive messengers are current EV owners. So marketing firms know that third-party endorsements of a product are very important in terms of influencing consumer decisions. This is the reason why websites such as Yelp and Travelocity are so successful and that why businesses take them quite seriously. And this is the same with electric vehicles. You know, hearing from people who are actually owners and have that firsthand experience is critical. So we then went and looked to see what's actually out there available. And what we found was that what is available is not focused on these sort of research. What we found out from our research is that what's available tends to be very analytical and fact or news-based. So we challenged our contractor, who was Edelman PR, the world's largest PR firm, to develop a campaign to market the concept of electric vehicles in BC, which would be compelling to the consumer. So they came up with Emotive, the electric vehicle experience. And so they came up with this campaign and branding, which really emphasized the idea of electric vehicles, the idea of it as a concept in terms of its feeling and its fun. So all the collateral that they developed, all the creative they developed was very much centered around the feeling of driving electric. There was a heavy focus also on sharing real life experiences being in electric vehicles. So the next few slides, I'll quickly run through some of the elements of this campaign, which we launched at the TD Jazz Festival last year. And I'll walk through each of those. And so one element of our campaign is involving what we call EV ambassadors. And actually, I think we have at least one ambassador in the crowd and possibly more. And these are people who lend that authentic voice, the Yelp review type information to people. They're people who are regular folks, families who own electric vehicles. They tend to be early adopters, but they nonetheless are involved in the campaign and out there talking to the public about their experience, their real life experience. We have sort of the basic things, a website and a Facebook page. I think we're at about 1,800 likes on our page at this point. The other thing we integrated as part of this, and again, we wanted to associate electric vehicles with the fun feeling of driving them. And as such, we ran contests. We've run 2 so far that kind of link the experience of driving an electric with something that's fun, other sort of fun experiences in your life. Through that, we're also trying to demonstrate that you can actually go on road trips and such with them. So we're trying to link out some of those messages through various means. We created a video, which is on our website and on YouTube as well. And that also provides a bit of that firsthand experience and that authentic voice of people, two families who own electric, and they talk a bit about it. So events, that's a pretty major component of our campaign. We try to get out there in the community. Where possible, we have, at a very minimum, we have vehicles on site. We let people experience them, sit in them, see what the dash, see what it's like, see that it's not that unlike a conventional vehicle, which they're used to. And wherever possible, we try to do ride and drives. As we've said, those are critical. Getting bums in seats is very important to convincing people. And one of the more innovative pieces of this campaign, because we're on a very, very limited budget, is that we've created community event kits. And what this is is basically a package that we can provide any community partner in BC who wants to have an emotive presence at a local event. It includes things like loaning of certain materials, tents, banners. We provide swag for people to give away, t-shirts. We do training of the staff that will be on site. And what this is allowed to do, these community event kits have really allowed us to be in more places at once with our very limited funds. So where are we going next? We're going to be continuing through this year and have a number of events lined up for 2015, and I anticipate next year as well. We'll be partnering with more communities in BC. We'll be looking to do more ride and drives and possibly focusing on doing them in partnership with companies. We'll be continually recruiting more EV owners as ambassadors, and now that the province has renewed the incentive funding, we'll be integrating some of that messaging into that. And I think that's it. Thanks.
I love the consumer research, and we've already seen some great stuff, but Dr. Jonn Axsen is going to present a lot on this topic. He explores transitions to sustainable energy systems. He draws from disciplines of economics, psychology, sociology, and engineering to investigate the nexus of technology, environmental policy, and consumer behavior. He's an associate professor at Simon Fraser University. Jonn's study of consumers' social valuation of plug-in electric vehicles has earned him recognition as Young Researcher of the Year at the OECD's 2011 International Transportation Forum. As we noted earlier, he's still quite young. So his research group will be releasing a comprehensive report on May 25th summarizing the Canadian plug-in electric vehicle study, which he'll talk a little bit about.
Thank you. Now, I just came up with this, but it occurred to me that perhaps the biggest barrier to electric vehicles becoming widespread adoption is our fundamental misunderstanding of consumers. And I have been dedicating my research program over the last 10 years to try to understand early buyers and mainstream buyers and to not impose my own thoughts and perceptions onto these other people. And I think the greatest strength in this area for myself and my research team is that we're more interested in people than we are in technology. And so we're trying to understand what people like, what they're interested in, and how a transition can occur. Now I'm taking this 10 years of research, maybe 20 or 30 projects, and trying to put it into one set of insights, at least as I see it, in terms of policy. So let's start off with a quick definition of what I'm talking about with plug-in electric vehicles. I'm including plug-in hybrid vehicles like the Toyota Prius plug-in and the Chevrolet Volt that can be powered by gasoline and electricity, as well as the pure electric vehicles like the Leaf and the Tesla and so on. Now, I will dispute with Zachary that Toyota Prius is being lame by having a plug-in hybrid version. And this is actually 6 or 7 years ago. I was in LA presenting to Toyota saying, you should design a vehicle like this, because our consumer research in the US at the time, but we find this also in Canada, continually shows us that the mainstream buyers are much more interested in a plug-in hybrid vehicle design, potentially with a very small battery, much more so than a pure electric vehicle. What I'm showing you here is the potential next buyers, the next 33% of new vehicle buying households. And most of those people, well, they've all shown us that they would like to pay extra for some type of plug-in electric vehicle, and mostly they want plug-in hybrid vehicles. And a good chunk of those are these small Toyota plug-in Prius type vehicles. So we found that in the US, and this study here I'm showing you is from this is almost 2,000 new vehicle buying households across Canada taking part in a very in-depth study with us. Now, well, let's look back at that for a second. The idea, what I'm showing you here is a potential. I'm saying 33% of new vehicle buying households. That's great. Shouldn't that equal 33% market share? You know, we're already there. Now, unfortunately, that is, well, not unfortunately. This is an opportunity for us to look at it constructively. This is potential demand. Right? So we have that at the top bar there is the 33% of latent demand. If all conditions were perfect, if existing preferences could be realized in the market, we'd see that. But then if we put in these real-world constraints, such as a lack of awareness, and we see that most people aren't aware. Our research suggests that it's even less what some other studies say, that it's maybe only 20% of new vehicle buying households that even know what a plug-in hybrid is. So if we take that in there, we get our market share projection even lower. And then if we only consider people who have home charging access, and that lowers us a little further still. And then if we consider that, yeah, there's only a few makes and models currently on the market, and some of these dealerships aren't even carrying these vehicles. All of that together takes us down from that 33% to about the 1% market share that we see in a jurisdiction like British Columbia right now. See this? So we've listed out some of these barriers, taken the potential, and brought it right back to what it is today. Now, without substantial changes in policy or some other acts of God, I guess, or something differently, we're not going to get beyond that, is what we're finding. But we can address these barriers. We can be constructive, and we can try and prioritize what we should do. So looking at some of these barriers, the way I look at this is considering there are demand-focused policies. So these are policies that are focused on the consumer, trying to create conditions so that buyers are more interested or becoming more aware or feel like they can buy an electric vehicle or plug in an electric vehicle. And then there's supply-focused policies. These are focused on manufacturers. These are requiring auto companies to sell, market, and develop vehicles to be sold in a given jurisdiction. We need both of these in order to make a transition that's going to be substantial enough to reduce greenhouse gas emissions within a place like British Columbia. So you can look a little more detail at the different types of policies here. There's a whole bunch, but among the demand side policies, of course, incentives can be quite powerful. We find that having an incentive like a $5,000 rebate can potentially double market share, which could be from 1% to 2%, for example, if that's the only thing that changes. Home recharging access, public charging, all of that's part of the puzzle. But I really want to draw your attention to a zero-emissions vehicle mandate, such as what's in California right now. This is that supply-focused policy that requires auto companies to develop, to market, to sell vehicles in that jurisdiction. We don't have something like this in British Columbia right now, and so the vehicles aren't here. Now let's look at this in an integrated perspective, and we've done some modeling work taking all our insights from these almost 2,000 new vehicle buying households, from our data set of British Columbia electric vehicle buyers. I should mention we have that data, we'll happy to share with you, and everything else that we've learned to model this out and say, well, if we put in different types of demand policies, so subsidies, increased charging infrastructure, that could get us to something like a 10% market share by 2030. But we're not going to get much higher than that without something like supply-focused policy. Now, if we have a zero-emissions vehicle mandate that's requiring auto companies to sell a broad variety of vehicles in a jurisdiction like British Columbia and to market them and to have their dealerships selling them actively, then we can get a very ambitious adoption rate like we see here, which happens to line up with what California is targeting with their zero-emissions vehicle mandate. To argue even more forcefully for that, this is modeling out to 2050 for the passenger vehicle sector. In order to get to our 2050 targets of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80%, current policies aren't going to do it. Having even an ambitious set of policies that includes a carbon tax isn't quite enough. We need something like a ZEV mandate or some equally powerful supply-focused policy to get these vehicles here and to get the automakers doing their part. Putting that another way, what we need an adoption curve like this. With a ZEV mandate, we're really getting to the majority of new market share being zero-emissions vehicles like plug-in electric as early as 2030, 2040. So all of this, I think, should inform how we prioritize policy efforts. Now, I know that cities have different abilities than provinces or states, which are different than nations. But overall, we need to look at what are the important policies to get us to a transition. And number one, supply-focused policy, every way I look at it, is the best way to really trigger a transition. We also need strong demand-focused policy. So we do need things like financial incentives, like many jurisdictions have the foresight to put in place. We do need other incentives, such as HOV lane access and parking breaks and so on. In terms of charging, we see that home charging is very important. That's the basis that could work for, especially for plug-in hybrid vehicle buyers that aren't constrained by range limitations. And then public charging is also important there, but unfortunately seems to be the first priority among all this. That's what I think.
So questions?
Malcolm Shield, City of Vancouver. A question for Dr. Axsen around the priorities you have up on your last slide very much put public charging at the bottom of the list. But that's the place where we can get charging in now. Rightly so, I think home charging is where we can expect charging to be in the long term. 80-90% of charging is going to happen at home. The rate at which building stock turns over is too slow to achieve that if we're using the new building code as the access point. And at the moment, retrofitting for multi-unit residentials, which is 60% of my population, is, if you're doing more than 3 or 4 stalls, the cost is just too high. So for me, the priority for public charging is the fact that you can't charge at home. You can either charge out on public when you're around and about. For Vancouver, we see that I'd say about 90% of our journeys on a daily basis are less than 30 kilometers, and about 70% are less than 10 kilometers. So you can do one charge every 3 or 4 days, which you will get through the public network. Now, the challenge we have is that in the long term, we're going to have this charging at home, so that the amount of public charging I need is much less. But in the short term, I need a lot of public charging. So where do I put my public infrastructure on that spectrum? I need a lot in the short term, but if I put that in now, I'm going to have a whole bunch of stranded assets. If I plan a network to meet the foreseeable need down the line, I haven't supported the market to get the EVs to that point. There's just, the two don't stack up, and based upon your research, which is great, it's the first sort of modeling and research that I've seen on this topic. I was wondering if you had any insights into that one.
Yeah, so the public charging aspect, I didn't want to harp on too much, but we did just release a peer-reviewed study where your logic makes sense. We went to challenge that and said, well, we have all this data on, almost 2,000 new vehicle buying households. We had them report their awareness of public chargers, and we assessed their potential demand for plug-in vehicles. And we really just put together a statistical analysis to see, is there an association between those things? And it just didn't pan out. There was either a very weak or non-existent relationship between awareness of public chargers and interest in plug-in vehicles, which tells me that there's not evidence yet that that is the best way to be building demand. With our interviews with existing owners of electric vehicles in British Columbia, we also find that they are using public chargers quite a bit, but again, they tell us they didn't need those typically in order to buy the vehicle in the first place. And they say now they're actually often just using them because they can, but and it's kind of fun to be seen kind of thing, but it's not really essential. So all that goes to tell us that, this is just the data speaking to me of that doesn't seem to be the highest priority efforts to be made. Now, that's looking Canada-wide or across North America. Of course, each jurisdiction is going to have its own issues, and the city of Vancouver may have a special case that could be looked at to figure out what the priority should be there. And I understand, your hands are tied in terms of what your priorities are. So if you have funds, and the only thing that you can put those towards at this point is public charging infrastructure, I'm sure there's an intelligent way to do that could contribute to a long-term transition.
I'll chime in with a couple. So what I've seen, the research shows something like 98% of EV owners have a garage or a place to plug in at home. So obviously these are people who have a place to charge at home who are buying them. There are some innovative businesses that are developing charging stations at apartment buildings, even combined with solar, where the apartment dwellers pay a fee and they can charge at home in their parking garage or in other parking garages around the city. So there are some business models developing to solve that. I think that is a critical component. Getting charging access at home, I think, is important for people living without a garage or whatnot. But Gil's going to chime in, and they've done, obviously.
Well, two things. I think workplace charging, I think, will be increasingly important. I think there's a lot of leverage there. Certainly there's an advantage for employers to offer that. You've got the concentration, you've got the economics. So we look for a lot there. We look at combining that with parking feebates that start to charge people for either for parking in general or for non-electric parking, then use those parking revenues to invest in the charging infrastructure or transit alternatives and so forth. Stanford University has used that approach to bring their single occupancy vehicle commute rate down from mid 70% to low 50%. And avoided $107 million in parking garage construction. So the economics can get very interesting for an employer. That's sort of one approach. The other is this, is that, I think you ask a very important question about how do we plan for a changing future. The future is going to change a lot faster than we expect. If you look at the price performance curves of solar, which looks kind of like that, and the price performance curves for batteries, and the price performance curve for electric vehicles, and the price performance curve for autonomous vehicles, and you put those things together, it's a pretty good bet that somewhere between 5 and 20 years from now, the entire transportation landscape will be profoundly different. And so all these assets, roads, parking garages, charging infrastructure, and so forth, could be stranded. So it's a big challenge to think about how do you ride that trend. in the most appropriate way. One thing that's interesting to us that we're starting to investigate is charging as a service. Some companies are offering to put in that public charging infrastructure for a city off the city's balance sheet. They own it, they manage it, they maintain it, they upgrade the technology, they deal with the technology risk of change. We don't spend the money, we don't make as much money, but that may be a way of riding the uncertainty, certainly one of the things worth looking at.
Cara?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is there's an interesting study out of Tokyo where they did find that by putting strategic public charging, now not to blitz it, but very strategic quick charging, that people did go to that part of town where they previously didn't go with electric cars. So it certainly does encourage people to travel to those places. I agree with you, though, in the future it's less and less, and I think one of the big challenges is that people who don't have EVs believe they're going to need public charging, but people who have EVs sort of say, well, I hardly ever use public charging, and so we sort of joked in Ontario that we should just put up a whole bunch of fake ones, and that would just give people the comfort, and then, damn it, if somebody actually really needed it. But yeah, anyway, that Tokyo study kind of does suggest that strategic public charging is worth it.
So I would be careful. That study gets cited a lot, but it's not. It's a very limited sample.
Yeah, I know, it's just a couple of chargers.
And it's not peer reviewed and all that.
Yeah.
So we'll jump to the next question.
A few over there.
Thanks for the presentation. I think they were excellent. Just a quick question. I think Brian mentioned it once. All I hear about battery technology is if we really think big scale in terms of battery development, we won't have enough resources or raw materials for really running all the cars, individual cars on batteries, which is why I believe the long-term perspective is really induction charging. And I'd love to hear maybe from Jonn or from Brian, where are we with induction charging at the moment? Because this can really solve so many issues we have at the moment with the battery systems.
Well, I'll let them answer, but first, there isn't a resource constraint. Mark Jacobson can maybe talk about it. He's done the research on what's needed as far as resources for batteries, and it's available. So there's not a resource constraint. But induction charging is cool
Still a good question.
and exciting, and they can answer that.
My point was just trying to say that it seems that technology is there, but it's very difficult to. What role can we play as a city to get more of that out there? We went to see these examples in Seoul where they're up and running and working, but there's not a lot of risk in the systems, and we've been talking about it in terms of bus rapid transit systems that we're putting up in Copenhagen, probably new light rail schemes or whatever, trying to get rid of the overhead power lines, or trying to create whether there's a battery constraint or not. I don't know, but at least in traditional city buses, it takes up a lot of space and a lot of weight to travel around with batteries that last for a day of bus service. So that's another kind of issue. But to me, I hear a lot of people and a lot of people coming around trying to pitch this idea, but it doesn't really kick off in terms of the risk, and probably like for us in the city of Copenhagen, many cities are like, we are not the first to take this gamble on new technology.
Thank you. Do you wanna? No. Okay, well, there's a lady back there in the back table. And if someone wants to get Mark a mic, we can talk a little bit about the resource availability.
Hi, my name is Monica, and I'm curious about the example it sets. If we keep encouraging people to use single vehicles, are we not trying to get people to stop driving entirely, whether or not it's electric or not, for infrastructure reasons, for other reasons? We also know there's that weird human, the backwards effect, where if I'm driving something more efficient, then I can drive more than I would have in the past, or take trips I wouldn't have made in the past. So I'm not sure how we also address that. I love the technology, I love that it's working and being adopted, but I am concerned that we're not necessarily addressing the main problem.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, but I think you heard from Brian that they have an approach where they're looking at all the different modes, and I think in most jurisdictions, like we're a panel talking about electric vehicles, but I think it's well recognized that it's only in place of a gas vehicle and for people who are driving. But I do think it's, of course, more ideal if you could get people out of cars. But I mean, there's a certain percentage of people we won't get out of cars, and so if they are going to drive, this is certainly significantly better. And it's also not a silver bullet either. I mean, it's one of many solutions, I think.
Well, there's a certain percentage of people we won't get out of cars until we give them a better alternative.
Yeah.
And that's why the mobility as a service approach is so key. The electric vehicles is a transitional strategy. It's what we can do now to improve things now. But if we remove the need to drive, because we can give you a better way of walking, biking, taking transit, taking network transportation companies, taking autonomous electric induction-powered vehicles that will come. I see a future where instead of 2-car households, you have 1-car households, where millennials never buy cars at all. We're already seeing that. Car buyership for the 18 to 29-year-old cohort in the United States peaked in 1983. It's been coming down ever since. Young people aren't even getting driver's licenses. There's a different automobile future ahead. We're not, to the question over there, we're not building the permanent next step. We're building a bridge next step that's going to bridge, I think, 5 to 20 years. We'll see how fast it actually goes. But that's the kind of design frame to keep in mind. How do we make it more convenient to not drive a car? And if it's going to be a car, how do we make it the least impactful, most ecological, safest, grooviest car it could be?
Yeah, from a personal experience, I've been car-free for over a decade. My master's studies and my professional career used to be focused on promoting bicycling, mass transit, and walking. So I'm hugely for that, but I think the majority in North America are going to be driving cars for quite a while. It takes a long time to change cities. I think we're doing it. We need to do it as fast as possible, but in the meantime, electric vehicles are so much better that I think we need to transition to them as well.
And there's only so much you can do with what's there. I mean, again, you got to understand the market and the diversity of people's values. And as much as we love cycling, whatever else, there's a lot of different people out there. But I'll say that a good strategy overall for climate policy wouldn't just focus on electric vehicles, right? I mean, California has a great model that I'll cite constantly of saying they have policies that are incentivizing a transition to electric mobility at the same time as having policies that incentivize energy efficiency, at the same time as having policies that are trying to cut down demand for vehicle kilometers traveled or vehicle miles traveled. You need all of those working together to get to these deep 2050 targets, and you need to start doing that now.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say to the thought that people aren't going to get out of their cars. Right now, these are U.S. numbers, excuse me, if you drive less than 11,000 miles a year, it's actually cheaper to take Uber or Lyft everywhere you go. They seem like luxury, expensive services, but at that level of driving, it's cheaper than buying this thing that is your second largest capital asset, called an automobile, that sits idle 96% of the time, generating no value, to use it for the times when you need it, when you could just go rent something for as little as a couple of minutes or a couple of hours or a couple of days when you need it. So we're starting to see that move. Right now, that's tiny. Uber, Lyft, and those guys are doing about 150,000 trips a day in the Bay Area. Sounds like a lot. It's out of, I think, 22 million trips a day in the Bay Area overall, so it's a tiny drop in the bucket, but it's starting to move.
Hi, Elizabeth Wilmot with Climate Solutions from Seattle, Washington. I've become, along similar lines to the last comment, I've become a huge fan of electric buses, and we're really seeing that crop up around the country, around the U.S. And I think that is, particularly from a social justice perspective, a really good strategy to reduce emissions from buses that would otherwise be potentially powered by diesel. And even just standing at the bus shelter waiting for a bus, most of us can probably attest, we're just sucking in fumes. And so I think from that perspective, both EVs and electric buses are critically important. And I'd love to see, hopefully with Renewable Cities doing this again in the future, I'd love to see more on that and more on e-mobility in general.
Yeah, I think electric buses make absolute sense right now. They're cost competitive on a life cycle basis, plus you have health benefits and quality of life benefits.
So this is a question for Dr. Axsen. My sense of your presentation is that if we could move in BC to a zero-emission vehicle policy, that would be one of the biggest drivers. What would that take, and what is the role that cities can play? And if there are others from other jurisdictions that can tell us how to get there, that would be helpful.
That's a fantastic question. The good news in British Columbia is we actually have that policy on the books. In 2007, 2008, when we were putting all the policy package together, we have a zero emissions vehicle mandate sitting in the legislation. It just hasn't been implemented. I still have yet to talk to the person with the right law degree to figure out what it takes to actually put that into law, but it's there already in the structure. And I think it's just a matter of pushing the right buttons with the right people. And then that goes to your next question, is then what can cities do? And I really came to this conference to learn that from cities' people. I'm not really used to this level of thinking. My hope is that there is a lot of potential, that I've heard some very strong leadership potential with this idea that cities can be champions, that cities are the future of provincial or state governments, of national governments. And I think that if a city coalition can come together and ask for something like this kind of policy, especially in British Columbia, when you can point to the website where it's already on the books, I think that could have a lot of leverage, but you tell me.
Questions?
2 years ago, I bought a turbo diesel thinking that was the best thing for the environment, and so things have changed. And I was thinking of selling it, buying an electric car, but then you're just passing that off to somebody else. And I know that there's a couple of local companies that do electric conversions. Just wondering what your thoughts are on that, Zachary.
Oh, I love the idea. I love it. And I don't think it's going to scale like mass production, but if you have a local person who can do it, or if you want to get into it, I think it's wonderful.
Yeah. The only thing is you won't get the incentive. The government doesn't give the vehicle incentive if you do a conversion, but certainly it's more affordable than the upfront cost of an off-the-lot vehicle. Yeah, I mean, lots of folks do it, and actually I think there's quite an enthusiast group here in BC who are doing it.
Brett Kincairn, City of Boulder. So I just wanted to pick up on this bus piece. We just did a deep analysis of our transportation emissions, and one of the real surprising findings was we have a very aggressive transportation master plan. Our goal is to increase all of our alt modes pieces and actually double transit in the next 15 years, which is fantastic. It's just that with the CAFE standards pushing efficiency in light-duty vehicles so fast and diesel engines not improving nearly as fast, we had this unexpected discovery that 15 years out, or 2035, if we didn't improve our bus fleet, we wouldn't actually be achieving any emissions reductions from all those conversions from light-duty vehicles to the bus. So this transition in the transit fleet is enormously important, and I haven't seen the kind of push in that field that we need to get that scaling as fast. One quick question around the workplace charging that Gil mentioned. Our DOE, I think, just came out with a study that said if you have workplace charging, you're 20 times more likely to drive an EV. So I'm interested to know whether your research actually corroborates that. So in Boulder, our next strategy is actually to use our city organization to encourage our employees who commute to get EVs, and sent that as a part of our strategy to promote EV ownership.
That was a DOE study?
Department of Energy.
Yeah, so Department of Energy study. I haven't seen that. I'd be happy for you to send that to me. In our own data, for Canada-wide survey data, didn't indicate that. I mean, we did control for viewing a charger at a workplace or otherwise. Could be that we had a small percentage of people that actually observed one, so that could be an effect you'd pick up otherwise. So my short answer is we haven't found evidence of that, but given the qualitative research, we do find that next to home charging, as Gil said, workplace is the second very important area, I believe.
And the follow-up to that is, one of the things we also discovered is that you don't necessarily have to put beyond level 1 charging in. So you can just have 110 charging in both workplace and home, because people are going to have their vehicles resident there long enough to do that, and that dramatically reduces these charging costs that we've been talking about.
That's what we find too.
And I mean, the thing with charging is you want it in a place that someone's going to be parked for a long time, and they're going to consistently park there. So home, workplace, that's the two biggest. The lady here, you can give it to her. Yep. And this is the last question. Sorry if you want to talk more. I'm sure all of us are eager to talk about.
Mandy Petrie-Hayes, City of Vancouver. Gil, you mentioned the gap you have in terms of electricity distribution capacity. You mentioned, 2 Teslas in a neighborhood and you're adding transformers. I'm wondering how you're funding that. Is it a cost the utility is bearing? Are you passing that on to residents or developers? We're struggling with the same thing here in Vancouver, and just wondering how you're approaching that.
We're actually in discussion about that right now.
And any thoughts on how that might go? And
It's It's a tricky one. You know, capacity is generally a responsibility of the utility. That's sort of where we start. If a single resident puts in a massive demand on capacity, it may make sense to put the charge on them. But if we put the charge on them and then 4 other people on the block then go do it, they've gotten a free ride on their neighbor. That doesn't seem fair. So we're thinking that through. We're also thinking through what the permitting requirements on this are. Where does it need to go into a, you know, where does it just need a building department permit? Where does it need to go to the utility? And so we're looking at a 40 kW threshold probably for that. We're in process on that right now. We just really had a couple of meetings about it in the last couple of weeks.
First of all, I want to thank everybody who came. I can't believe how many people showed up for this. I'm really happy because I'm excited about it. We're all excited about it. Thanks so much to these wonderful presenters, and Gil is going to have a great final word,
Do I get
sure.
a last word? I just want, to the question about what cities can do, I just want to invite you to think about what cities shouldn't do or what cities can stop doing. Let's stop subsidizing single occupancy vehicles. And let's stop subsidizing internal combustion engines. So it's not a matter of what we spend money for, but we stop spending money on, because we're incenting the kind of behavior that we don't want. Let's stop doing that.